everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. And how is everyone doing this week? Tough to tell, right? It's all murky. I guess I'm feeling murky. Feels like that should have been a song in the 70s, Feeling Murky. You have a guy striding down the sidewalk. 70s were a time when people were feeling murky too, right? Maybe that's just the general existential mode of being for humanity. Feeling murky. Anyway, I'll tell you what will get you out of the murk, and that is today's episode, because I'm talking to Mabe Fratti. And if you don't know who Mabe is, I'm going to read you her bio right now. Originally from Guatemala, musician Mabe Fratti studied cello from a young age, but was on a path to become a journalist before a Goethe Institute residency took her to Mexico to work on her music. There she got involved in the Mexico City improvisational music scene. Mabe produced her first album. Okay, let me break into this bio for a second here. I'm going to pre-apologize to every Spanish speaker that is listening to this, because I'm going to... And look, I'm the one who wrote this short bio. I could not have done this. For some reason, I wrote the title of every one of Mabe's albums into this bio. I am a terrible Spanish speaker. When I say anything, my wife, who is somewhat fluent, laughs hysterically at anything that I say in Spanish. So let me just pre-apologize to every single Spanish speaker that is going to have to hear my dull Pennsylvanian tongue say these titles. All right, well, let's get back to this bio. Mabe produced her first album, Pie Sobre la Tierra, in 2019. I think that was pretty good. Which was followed by Será que ahora podremos entendernos in 2021, Se ve desde aquí in 2022, and her latest, Sentir que no sabes, was just released in June on Unheard of Hope. And folks, it's fantastic. I heard Se ve desde aquí, again, apologies, everyone, back when it came out and loved it. And her new one is fantastic. And I was like, two in a row, this great. I gotta talk to her. And holy crap, this is a great talk. Mabe's very open. We get into her childhood. You know, Mabe is born kind of the tail end of a dictatorship in Guatemala. And I've had a number of guests who are born in a world where there's some freedom opening up. And I'm always very curious about how that both affects their existential paths and also their creative paths. What it allows them to do, what is closed off. You know, the usual things I talk about on the show. And Mabe is very open in talking about that. And I love her music. And she's a great person. So I hope you enjoy this. Coming up on the show next week, political cartoonist Matt Boers. Cool dude. I love his comics. And he, for a long time, he was the founder and editor of a wonderful political cartoon site called The Nib. Sadly, it is gone now. But Matt was cool. I just talked to Kishibashi. That was also very cool. Quentin and Brian from the hip-hop duo Angry Black Men. That was a fantastic talk, and that's all coming up, so look forward to those episodes. But for now, let's talk to Mabe. I was thinking about this. So I talked to, do you know Rafael Terral, who's kind of experimental musician from Portugal? He's great.
Sounds familiar.
His new album is great. Anyway, he was born kind of like at the tail end of like the dictatorship in Portugal. And you too were kind of born at the tail end of the Guatemalan Civil War. And when I talk to people who grow up, weird how it's mostly South America or Central American artists that I talk to. It's weird. It's almost as if my country did some fucked up stuff for the last couple hundred years. I'm curious about like the possibilities, you know, that are open to you or closed to you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if like that has like, if you've thought about that, you know, because you're born in 92, right? The Civil War ends about 4 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. 95. Um, you know, I always talk about this with my family because it's something that it's not so old, right? It's an internal conflict that you can still see like the residuals of like all of the mess that was done, and infrastructurally you can feel it on the city, you can feel it on whenever you travel to like any other part of the country. um but yeah, like I yeah you can, if yeah, you can dig deep on that because uh, how can I start, because for example, my father's brother, he became involved with the guerrilla, so he had to fly, like he had to leave exile, he and his wife had to leave Guatemala because they thought that he had guns to like rebel against the military, the militia, whatever. Um, so that's stuff that I talk with sometimes when he said like he moved to Guatemala like 3 years ago, back to
Mm.
Guatemala, and like we would have these conversations about, you know, the civil war and like political conversations, and you would see how um, Guatemala is a very conservative place, kind of related with that civil war, um, and therefore, like my conservative upbringing, for example, um, or Christianity. There's a lot of missionaries that came from the U.S. And that like evangelized a lot of Guatemalans. So it's kind of like a pretty evangelic country. Um, yeah, so that's also my upbringing. Uh, that's what I mean when I mean conservative, actually. So yeah, so that's one thing. And yeah, how can I? It's complex and long, and yeah, it's a good topic to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can get into it with some more specific questions
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I don't have to
I even like forgot the question, man.
it's well. I mean, the thing that piques my curiosity is, as you come out of this period of like decades long tumult, right? What is open to you as a possibility,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Is it
yeah.
a
Okay.
struggle to like realize you're an artist, or is it easy because it's like, well, I can be anything because kind of like there aren't pathways.
Yeah.
Like if you're like in America, if you're born middle class, it's somewhat placid, right? There isn't a, you can be handed a script and just follow that script for the rest of your life. And you don't even have to give it any thought.
That's right. I mean, like I was born in middle class. Like my parents were the ones that really struggled. Like my mother. It's very complicated story. She had to migrate from her town and stuff. But yeah, I was born in middle class in Guatemala. Firstly, it wasn't so middle class, but then they started to do good, and we moved to the suburbs from my grandma's house to the suburbs, and we had a very peaceful upbringing with a lot of restrictions because of Christianity. Um, but the idea of becoming an artist wasn't really an option for me from the start. Like my mother was very much like, because the way she was, um, the way that she grew up was very, um, because she had older brothers and they had to get out of their economic situation. She was very like tough, right? She became like she became an engineer basically, and she was all about education, and because she was all about education, I could get the chance to go to an academy to learn cello, right? So that was an opportunity that I had, that is not something that is easy to get in Guatemala until like maybe 15 years ago, that there was like this program that is kind of like a replica of a program that started in Venezuela, in Chavez, Venezuela. Um, that was like a free school of classical instruments. El Sistema de Orquestas, that's the way they call it. And they made a replica of that in Guatemala, so that there's like these new opportunities for kids that don't have resources to get to study any instrument, especially like in the classical area, style. And yeah, like I got that opportunity, and I was learning to play it, but like to become a musician, like it was like the only way that I could see it happen was like through getting into this national orchestra or something. It wasn't like any kind of um, alternative road for that, right? So my parents weren't really like, they were like, you have to find like a proper career. So I started to, yeah, I went to study journalism. Yeah. But then, yeah, but
interesting.
then, yeah, but I wouldn't stop making music. So kind of things started to develop naturally music wise because I wouldn't stop making it, right?
It's interesting, and I'm curious about this. When I talk to a lot of artists who like are associated with like a specific instrument, a lot of times they're like, I just kind of got assigned that. In second grade, I was assigned this instrument, and then I just took to it. Like, is that the same thing that happened to you?
No, no, no. I wanted to learn. I really wanted to learn. Firstly, saxophone, but I was having like this very bad nose problem, like breathing problems. It wasn't asthma, but it was kind of like chronic rhinitis or something. But when you're a kid, when I was a kid, it was terrible. I don't know, allergies or any kind of like breathing problem when you're a kid is worse, I guess. So I didn't get into saxophone because the director of the academy was like, yeah, I don't think you can make it. But my sister, she wanted to study violin, so I would just go to see her play. And the director of the children's orchestra, he played the cello, so he became eventually my cello teacher. And he would play the cello to show the kids how to play the parts. And he played it so well that I was like, no, I want to study that, and then he became like a great sensei to me, and a friend. And yeah, kind of like, it's a teacher that I won't forget because yeah, he was special.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Not to, but like, are you born in the capital?
Yeah.
So when you're a kid, and at what point you said you moved from your grandmother's house to the suburbs? How old were you?
I was like 7 years old or 6 years old. Yeah.
Okay. So what were those first 7 years of your life like?
Were nice. I mean, like, it was fun because I had my grandmother was living in the first floor and we were living in the second floor. And there was like a little house behind, and there was like my aunt living there. So we would just like hang out like with my cousins all the time. And if my other aunts and what's the name, uncles came to visit my grandmother, it would become like a big hangout. But yeah, like I have these very good memories about that house because it was like a lot of places to hide. There were like different environments because of these that I'm telling you, that there was a lot of people living there. Yeah, it had a mellow vibe into it as well, because yeah, like also grandmothers are like have mellow vibes. At least my grandmother had a very mellow vibe. She was also very Christian, is very Christian. She's like 100 years old now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So like each part of the house had a different energy then, basically. Like you could, if you went to where your grandma was, if you went to where your aunt was, right, there was all this.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you were you aware of the different energy? I asked that because I'm curious if you were kind of closed off to those feelings when you were younger, or if you were open. Were you sensitive?
Oof, it's hard for me to remember now. Like right now, I have to just like focus and think about. I just think about those moments, and maybe I wasn't so sensitive. Maybe I was just like standard kid. Normal kid. Um, but you know, uh, uh, it's hard for me to remember right now.
I mean, I guess what I'm curious about, maybe we can get there through another avenue, is, how when I'm going to say this in a bad way, and then I'll change it to a better way. I was going to say, how Christian was your family? Right, you grew up Pentecostal, right? How much of that influenced the vibe of the household?
Yeah. So my grandmother was the most Christian of all. There was a moment that I remember she was telling me that having like statues of frogs inside of the house was satanic, kind of like there was this point that everything was satanic, right, in the 90s and
Yeah,
early
yeah.
2000s. And so my mother, I think she was more playful. Like she just like didn't let us, like watch certain things on TV or watch much TV at all. She was pretty strict about that. Something that I'm grateful for, that because I could do other stuff instead of just like watching TV. Um, and so yeah, on the side of my house, it was more playful. Down there on my with my grandmother, it was more uh like serious. Oh yeah, and also like there was my grandfather as well. He was alive, but by then, and also my uncle was living inside there. So there was like this vibe, like more solemn and Christian, but now she's more fun actually.
Mhm.
And my aunt, uh, she was more permissive with my cousins and stuff. So that was more like the fun stuff,
Uh-huh.
right? Like there was more like, yeah, we could have more, like fun stuff going on there.
Uh-huh.
So it was different, yeah. So
I see. Okay.
that's the
So
different kind of vibe,
I
yeah.
understand now. So it feels like if you wanted to like read a psalm, you would go hang out with your grandmother. But if you wanted to go to the park, you would go to your aunt.
Yeah, but there was no park. Like we would just stay inside because that's one of the things that I tell you about Guatemala's infrastructure that was really hurt by the civil war, or by corruption in general,
Mhm.
that there wasn't like, first there was like this sensation that every place was not safe, and the other one is that there was no like no public spaces, like that was something that was really, that is still really a problem for like any kind of cultural development in Guatemala, that I feel that would be so amazing because we have very good public spaces, but very few. For example, there's like El Centro Cultural Miguel Ángel Asturias, which is like one of the most beautiful theaters I know. I think it's the most beautiful one. Um, but yeah, like you have that in the middle of the city, and it's always kind of empty, and it could be like a great park. I don't know people why they don't go there. I don't like that kind of stuff happens. So
Okay. So wait. So can you tell me like just what's your knowledge of what is happening outside of the household, right? As you're getting older, like how much do you know about like what is happening, like what happened before you were born, and
oh
because
yeah.
because is it because you said you're like, well, there's not really public spaces. Like, do public spaces develop? And you said, I mean, I know you said that even now there's not really, but like, do
There's
things
few.
get
There's few.
better as you get older?
There's few. Yeah. It's I can't be like there's no public space, but there's few. There's few, and close to that house there were none that I could recall. Um, yeah, my knowledge about the outside. I mean, I would go to visit for example, my grandma on my mother's side, for example, to this like complex that I was called Nimahoyu. That was kind of chaotic. So yeah, I would just go out to like specific places, family places, or to school or to church. And sometimes we would, like travel like somewhere, like maybe to Coban, which is like where my mother is from, or like there, like you just take a car and go like somewhere else. But yeah, that was the knowledge that I would have. Like mostly it was supervised,
Mhm.
in the early ages of my life, I would say.
Does it feel? It doesn't feel dangerous to you?
Oh, man, like I always have this conversation with friends because they are like, you would see if you go to Guatemala that there's like cars are the screen the windows are, how do you say, polarized? How do you say that?
Tinted?
Yeah, when they're black.
Mm-hmm.
Tinted.
Yeah.
Tinted. Okay, yeah. So the windows are tinted, and like everyone is traveling with their windows closed.
Mm.
And every time that because I don't like to be in a closed car, I just like to put the window down.
Sure.
Sometimes people tell me like, no. I put the AC, but close the window. It's not safe, or they just became used to having closed windows, right? But I when I was maybe like years before I left Guatemala, I would, like just walk and don't care. I mean, there were moments that I was mugged, there was moments that I was, there was a very critical moment, but I was really in a very bad situation. I was just like walking alone, well, with my father and some friends, climbing a volcano alone, like we were alone. We were a small group, and I was using my iPod, and of course there was this guy that came and started to shoot at us. It was crazy. Yeah, like maybe my closest to death experience was then. But yeah, I didn't care anymore, like I don't like to think about if I'm not in a very safe place. I'm just going to touch the wood here. But like I just wanna, like I would like to leave a city. It's to be able to experience a city, is one of the best things you can do when you're walking, or I don't know, like you're with your window down. I don't bike, but if I could bike, I would. But to walk around is one of my favorite things, and I could really take advantage of that, but way later in my life. I just I just made it happen, I think.
Mm-hmm. So you don't grow up like particularly anxious or anything like that?
I think that I was pretty respectful of my parents and pretty like I was anxious of not meeting the standards that my parents would require. So that was one thing that I still see reflected in my psychology today, right? It's a kind of like perfectionist anxiety, I would say. It was because my mother was like, you have to be the best, you have to study the best. That's the way that I got through. And you have to see the example of, me and your father and your sister. And it was well-intentioned, but definitely leaves you something in your brain.
Yep, I get it. I think this is a universal experience of kind of like the parent that has a desire for you. And then you have to figure out like how to navigate that desire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be very hard for me. This is kind of like, I'm going very deep on therapy right now, man. I don't know if it was kind of, I think that's basically the kind of anxiety that I would have. I am the middle child. So, my bigger sister, she was kind of like maybe like the one that had to travel many more emotions than me, and my also my little sister, right? Because they have different standards setting. But yeah, I would say I was not so anxious, but I was definitely a very a loner kind of person, like I wouldn't have a lot of friends and stuff, I was just like, hanging.
Yeah. Does that materialize? Like, say you're recording a track. Does that materialize in like, I'm going to do this like 30 times until it's perfect? Or,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I can be annoying in that sense. Yeah. Yeah. There has been points that's why when I am in the studio, for example, and there's someone else, I feel so bad because I know that they are going to get so tired of me, like saying again, 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 again. Like,
Do you allow for novelty? Or does it have to be like the thing, like whatever's in your head, this has to be it? Or if you like hit a note where you like, I didn't expect that, but I enjoy the way it sounds.
If I enjoy the way it sounds, I give myself the chance for that. But if it's something difficult and I have to nail it, I have to nail it. And sometimes I'm very purist about it, and I'm like, I have to nail it in one take. And that kind of stupid shit.
How much of that is your mom, and how much of that is studying this from at an early age in a kind of conservatory type setting?
Yeah, I think it's both, definitely. I mean, I feel that from my mother, I would kind of get the perfectionist. Maybe this is kind of an estimation that might be wrong, but like the kind of perfectionism that I look from my mother, it's kind of like a career-wise and relationship-wise, and yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, I'm just trying to nail it. I'm improvising here my answer, but yeah, I really don't know.
I mean, we can't really know, but it's
yeah. We can.
It's more of a prompt to like think about it.
That's right.
Did your mom become an engineer because she wanted to be an engineer, or because it was a good job to have?
Both my parents are engineers, actually, and yeah, I think, for example, I see my mother, and she's a very brainy person. I think it's kind of both, because of course it was a good job to have, because she wanted. I remember this. She wanted to be a veterinary, and my grandfather told her, "Yo, you're not going to make any money with that."
Interesting.
And then she went to engineering, and because she's very brainy and she's very good at math and stuff, she became a very good engineer, And yeah, I feel that my father, I don't know if he would ever do something else, because he has the engineer vibe in it. In him, he's always fixing stuff and stuff. He's kind of. Once I brought him like an amp that was broken, and he fixed it, and I think he's just like an electronic engineer person, like. He's like that's his vibe, but now he's into making bread as well.
Oh, so, yeah. Interesting. By the way, the G note on my organ back here is not working very well. Can he come to Los Angeles and fix it for me, please?
Yeah, like travel him to fix it. I think those are very easy to fix because they are like purely electronic. It's not digital at all, right?
No,
that is like Yeah,
I just probably have to open it up and then find where the wire is just loose a little bit, and then probably do something there. But
yeah, exactly. That's what they do, right? Yeah. Supposedly it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your parents meet in the capital, or did they meet before and then move there together?
University. Yeah, studying engineering. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know like what life was like for them at that time? I'm just curious because I'm like, again, you're born kind of like basically you grow up in the aftermath of the Civil War.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, why I ask is because I'm wondering how that pushes them in certain directions and then how that pushes you in certain directions, their experiences.
No, I mean, for them it was kind of complicated in that sense because there were shootings in the university because it was the national university, and that was where there was like a lot of students that were making riots would happen, and yeah, they were having like this first-hand experience of that, and my father's brother, he was he was getting into the guerrilla, and that was a problem at home. And on my mother's end, she wanted to be just like, studying and trying to be, detached from the thing. But it was a conversation in between like the siblings, right?
Right.
But they would it was, they were, I think they were very hard workers, very focused on, finishing their career and start to make money, because it was tough for them.
Yeah. I can only imagine in the sense that things have changed here in the US to the point where, you have these questions in your head where it's like, well, what do I really do? Right. We might, maybe we're on the verge of some kind of fascism or something like that. You don't know. But when the world changes, now you have to make a decision. It's like, well, am I just going to put my head down and move ahead and do the thing I want to do? Do I try to, like your uncle who's like, well, maybe I should do something. It's everyone gets handed these decisions and there's no right answer, right? It's just I got to figure something out in the middle of this mess. And I have it's so chaotic. I don't know where it's going. So I just kind of have to figure out what's best for me at this moment.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened with them. They were trying to focus on what's going to be right for them at that moment because they had this immediate, maybe more personal, immediate urge to, figure out how they would, live, right? And there was something that happened after the Civil War. It was there was this very blank slate, slate, I would say, or a very open field of opportunities because there was so much chaos before that, and there was a lot of desire to move forward into whatever you would call, neoliberalism or, modernize Guatemala and stuff. That the move was more to create the enterprises that would create, modern Guatemala or whatever, So I think that generation had the opportunity to create from a very weird starting point, because it was kind of you had the Civil War on the back of your head, but mostly the people that were most affected by it were not in the city. There was riots, and there were groups that would have confrontations and stuff in the city, but the people that were really suffering was the people that was in the countryside. That was terrible. I mean, what I know about that, it's
So when you say a blank slate, that's the thing I think I was trying to get to at the beginning, where I was it seems as outside of your parents saying well, you should do something practical, and so you kind of you're well, I'll get a degree in journalism, right? There's there aren't any kind of there's no necessity in certain ways, whatever class you grow up in, there are certain kinds of, at least here in America, right, there's certain jobs that you're supposed to do, right, because that's just what it is to be part of whatever that class is, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing for you, outside of the pressures of your parents, did you have any pressures on you to do anything specific? Or was it easy to kind of be like, all right, I'll get a degree in journalism, but I'm really just going to concentrate on being an artist?
Well, no. I never thought I could concentrate on being an artist. Like whatever that is happening to me right now is something beyond that what I ever dreamed of. I just wanted to do music and to see what happens. Like I thought that I was kind of like I had to look for something else. Because either way I would like be stuck in whatever. It was kind of a confusing moment for me. Like, but to have music and to be stubborn about it, kind of like saved me perhaps from following a career that I really didn't want to follow. But my parents are always still even telling me about like they are like, who's going to take care of our business now? Like, and I'm like, I feel it in my heart. It makes me feel like it actually makes me feel something in my heart of confusion. There. Oh no.
Again, another universal.
Exactly.
I mean, up until maybe a year or two ago, and I've been doing this professionally for now over a decade. My parents were wholly uninterested and like, this is not gonna pan out. Even though I have been doing it, making a living for over a decade at this point. So
wow.
I get where that's coming from. I get the feeling.
That's crazy, right? Yeah, and it's crazy because also, I mean, like, even if they are not interested, they are very happy of what's happening. They feel proud. Like, I don't think they like the music, but they are, like they appreciate that I am kind of like there, like making stuff. And the press, they like the press,
Do they get it? Even if they don't like it, do they get it?
Yeah, my aunt who follows me, she sends them stuff. Or sometimes if I feel that something is really going to make them proud, I just send it to them.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, of course. I still have that kid inside of me. Like I wanna.
You want the pats on the head from the parents.
Sometimes I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, like or, like not even, like just make them know what I'm up to, because I don't talk to them that often, right? I don't have a very good communication skill on chatting when I'm away, like, and I've been away like for 8 years already. So I'm very bad at communicating, but sometimes I just want to let them know what I'm up to, right?
I get it.
What better than send them like a press thing or whatever,
Yeah. Could you walk me through that decision that you made? Like when you're like, I want to do this for real. I know, like, did you know in your heart, like if you went into journalism that it just wouldn't feel good?
I mean, I like academia. So when I was in journalism, if it wasn't a boring class, I would have a lot of fun. So I would just like be focused on learning, and then I would say like, okay, maybe I'm just going to work in a radio and play music. And there's some radios here in Guatemala, and like I would just think about like the opportunities and stuff. But yeah, walk through the decision to like deciding to just focus on the music. It was more about getting some opportunities on residencies. Like I got like this residency here in Mexico. That was my actual like first experience in Mexico, besides once that I came before, but I just came here for like 4 days or something. But when I came to Mexico for my residency, that was beautiful because that was my first experience outside Guatemala. And I had been playing in Guatemala like constantly, in very different kind of stuff, like from making a concert of music that I really wanted to play in weddings and stuff, um, to play in this residency that eventually would have a, like a show in a festival called Normal, which is a very nice festival. So that was a very beautiful experience, and I was like, oh wow, Mexico has these opportunities, right? But I was like, maybe eventually I would come to live to Mexico and focus on music and stuff. And then after I dropped out of journalism,
Okay. So you dropped it. So talk to me about that then.
I dropped out. I dropped out and I moved to Antigua, Guatemala, which is like a very touristic area of Guatemala, to a very filthy place full of bed bugs.
Oh no!
That
I've
was
lived through
terrible,
that.
man.
Nope, I've lived through that. I know how awful it is. Yeah.
I hate it. I just hate it. Like, and then like I was working there for a while, and I was like, I have to move to Mexico after this residency thing, and then the same guys that brought me to Mexico brought me to Berlin, and I was like, no, I really want to make it. I want to make this happen, So I decided to come here to Mexico for 3 months to see what happened. And I stayed.
So it started off as a lark. We'll see what happens. And then, so like if maybe it had been a little more difficult or something like that, who knows, right?
I mean, like the thing is that I had a plan for the 3 months, right? I had my friends that I met through this residency, and I got a small course on, production, but mixing and stuff. So I was like, okay, I have this small plan. So, I got the course. I got keys for the studio from my friend that I met in the residency, and it started to work out. I got a gig, and then I got a job, and after that, things started to happen.
Okay. At what point do you go from playing other people's music to playing your own music? Like, is that early?
Yeah. I had bands. And I had, I was part of a band. I was part of a quartet organized by this also very good cellist from Guatemala called Pamela Flores. So we had these projects, and I had the, like side jobs that were sometimes very well paid, right? So I was always playing my own music, but when I started my solo project was when I got a interface to record myself, and that was in Guatemala, and that's how they found out about my music to bring me to these residencies and stuff. But officially, I started more focusing on my personal project when I was here in Mexico alone. Like I had a EP released in Guatemala, but it was a matter of time that I would start, like playing it live alone, and I don't know how to.
Well, was there a scene? I guess the thing I'm curious about is when I'm thinking back to when I talked to Rafael Terral. And he was saying, like, because of the dictatorship, there was no music scene. It was, like you said, right? A blank slate, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, does a scene develop? Do you only start to find sympathetic musicians when you move to Mexico? What are kind of some of the outside things that are like helping you figure out this?
Oh man, no, I mean, like there is like a community in Guatemala for sure, but it was so eclectic. It is so eclectic, but it was like they are still my friends, like for example, the label that signed that first EP that I made in Guatemala, Bajo Presión, they got like ska, hip hop, they got me, they got rock, they got punk, and they are like, like I know them, and they we would hang out, and yeah, so that's one part of the community. And there's also like the more electronic part of the community, which was more based on dance music. And there was like this particular event that was organized by this guy called Casta, DJ Casta, and he would make this festival of electronic music, but he would invite some like more dancey stuff, but he would also invite like very crazy experimental stuff as well. And that was like a small thing that happened, but it was kind of connected with an institution called Centro Cultural España, which is like a institute that Spain put in Guatemala. I would say this very bluntly, like out of guilt or something. But like they would just like, I don't know, but it's good because they made a cultural center. I mean, like they create this cultural center, and they give money, and they like have a theater, have galleries and stuff. So that I mean, like. It's kind of
imagine that, like, sorry, here you go.
Sorry, exactly. Diplomatic move, and yeah. So it's kind of like in collaboration with them that he started to make these events, But there's basically like these things happen in waves because there's not enough money for them to happen, and if like there's like a community that emerges. Sorry. They will eventually be like brought down by like the necessity to create a stable life, right? So there's a lot of people that start to work on like call centers, which is a big thing in Guatemala, which is like such a boring and terrible job. But I have a lot of friends that work on call centers. Well, you would just like focus on like being a journalist, right? And or being, doctor or, whatever. And, or having your business and stuff, which is kind of like, I think it happens everywhere perhaps, but in Guatemala, it's like that's like the community would just like dissolve on that aspect, like you have to make your life happen eventually.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so like it would come in waves, even venues as well, like venues would shut down because the municipality, which is like, you're too loud, you have to close, or like the money will run out, like it's all about the money and like the regulations that sometimes were pretty nonsensical in the city,
But what I'm getting is like the eclectic nature, like having all of these things kind of coexist together, all of these different, I don't know what you want to say, genres, or just like ways of making things kind of coexisting in a way that like maybe if you hadn't had that blank slate, or maybe if it had been whatever, right, we can come up with like lots of different ways that things could have turned out differently, but allows you to kind of like come up in a space that has a lot of different things happening at once.
Yeah, I mean, like there's like exactly at first it's a small city, right? Like there's no chance to create like a bigger community for a very niche kind of art, right? But yeah, the thing is like, but who knows, sometimes like punk culture is very particular. But anyways, like what would happen is that giving that blank slate for sure gives you space for like free drawing, like free draw whatever, and to have this I would say this about Central America in general, and I'm part of it, so I can talk this, I feel that we are very no one cares about us, like we have like the Mexico is a very powerful, like cultural reference of Latin America, and you have like South America, which has like very strong, identities and culturally as well for like the world. But yeah, like there's these smaller names that no one really cares about. So like there's where Guatemala is, or Ecuador. Like no one talks about these places.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Here's I don't know if this will make sense. You're the Chicago of the Americas. Because everyone's paying attention to New York and LA, and Chicago's just allowed to kind of like make the art they want to make. It's a big enough city that it supports an art scene, but the eyes aren't on it like they are in New York and LA. So
exactly.
Okay.
But the sad part about Guatemala is that it doesn't have like you can do whatever, but there's really like still the infrastructure is such because of like this situation we have of economical situation. It's not Chicago has the money, I would say, and Chicago has like enough people for like these scenes to exist perhaps, but yeah we kind of have that freedom to make whatever we want, definitely, because we don't have the attention, like, and also because of that there's also like this other side that becomes very on like it doesn't have the inspiration or like the push to like create, because there's no one cares, right? So it has to come from a very internal impulse or something.
But if things had been more solid, you could have turned out to be first chair in an orchestra somewhere, as opposed to wanting to make your own music.
I don't know. It requires a lot of it requires a lot of work, right? I wanted to be in the Symphonic of Guatemala in one point when I was a teenager, and that was a dream. But I also by becoming a teenager, my discipline became worse. I became slacker and a rebel a little bit. I started to make my band or whatever, and things changed on my discipline when I was a teenager.
What happened? What happened that made you less disciplined, less I'm gonna straight and narrow. I'm gonna become part of the symphony and be like, no, I'm this. I feel more punk. I'm gonna go do this thing on my own.
I just remember like there was like this mellowness of my, like the loop of my living that I was like kind of getting too much of it, and because there was a lot of restrictions they were very well-intentioned restrictions, but they were really kind of like on my neck, and I was living in this area of the suburbs of Guatemala that was very kind of boring as well. So like there was like whatever that could change that, like hanging out with friends and, making, anything, that was kind of like outside of the loop would be exciting, and I think it was a mellow vibe, and I wouldn't go too much out of my house because I didn't get permission, but it was I think it was the mellowness of, I think I was depressed basically.
And you just needed to get out of that feeling. I started to be like start to like run away from my house and do that kind of teenager stuff that was kind of like very stupid, because I would just like run away from my house into the suburb, which is like closed neighborhoods with like houses and houses and houses, like I would just like walk somewhere. But like there wasn't really a plan. It was just like do whatever, Yeah, I get it. Teenage rebellion.
I hate teenager life, Yeah,
it's boring. The suburbs are boring. I probably, no matter what country you grow up in, the suburbs are boring. And if you have any kind of spark or ambition, you're going to clash with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That seems to be one of the few universal things that I learn on this show is that.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for me. I just did not like this. I grew up in the suburbs. I just didn't feel good. And I could never like pinpoint why it didn't feel good. I just knew that like, I'm like, well, it's nice for my parents. I'm not criticizing my parents at all. It was
No.
a lovely place to grow up, but I just didn't feel good.
Yeah, like there was like this thing about when like maybe about parents that it was about getting a house, right? Like we have to get a house, and that's where our family will grow up. But there was no idea of where was the house. If it was surrounded by houses, what is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like that, one could easily just follow the script that they were given, right? You live in the suburbs. Now you go get a normal job. You have a family. You buy a house. It's there for you if you want that. And some people do want that. Some people just follow it blindly because they think that's what they're supposed to do, right? And then there's a lot of people like I think you and me who are just like, oh, this just, I don't know. There's something about this that grates in my soul.
Yeah, no. It was very, yeah. Whenever I think about my teenage years, I have just like this feeling that gets over my body that is a very gray kind of feeling, oh my God. And I just want to, like, it's kind of, like the mellowness is such that it makes me want to, like, it makes me dizzy, But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. How devout were you when you were a kid personally? Like, did you have faith? Did you really believe in Christianity, or was it just something you had to do?
Yeah, no. I really believed. Yeah. I was like, because my cello teacher was also very devout. Like, so I really tried, I was very confused about like getting touched by the Spirit and speaking in tongues and trembling and stuff. I could never do that. So I was like, why am I not such not connected to faith that I can feel these feelings that I actually feel, that they are like very crazy and godly or whatever. So I was devout in a moment, but then it was always detached from me. Like I tried. That's what I can say, that I really tried, but I would never, like have a very spiritual experience until I started to play music with the band of the church. And that's when I was starting to feel like, okay, music, when I'm playing with music with the band, I'm starting to feel like something, but it wasn't God. It was just like the music, right? So
yeah.
So basically I tried to be devout.
When did you pull that apart? That kind of, I get what you're saying when you're saying like, when I started playing music, it felt there was that spiritual feeling. I kind of understand it. When did you figure out that it was the music and not something divine?
I mean, I always felt it when I was playing the cello with the children's orchestra, or it just became more intense because there was like this crowd that was crying and having a spiritual experience. So that was kind of like a feedback for the music that was kind of like, wow. And then just looking at the structure of the church and really trying, like I was really trying, and I started to become a hypocrite because I was just like starting to smoke pot and drink and being a worldly how do you say that, like a pagan, became more pagan. I was like, I'm just like a hypocrite, I'm just going to quit, because I never connected really. Like I tried to connect but didn't really, and goodbye.
Yeah. I 100% understand it. Because I would go to temple.
You also had that?
I would go to temple and I would be like, I guess I'm supposed to like, and I would just kind of like knee jerk say like, I believe in God. And then I thought about it more and I'm like, I guess I don't. And it took a while for me to like, but I said it just because I thought that's what I was supposed to say. But like, I never felt that feeling. Whatever that feeling is, it never, I get more meaning from art than I ever got from
Exactly.
any kind of religious experience that I was supposed to engage in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it happened to me from art, from like doing art with other people, like that.
Mhm.
That's what has been very rewarding for me and has really made me, like think about because sometimes I'm like, where does my morality come from? My morality come from, like the church and stuff? And then I'm like, well, I don't have like, I think my brain really reset. So I feel that I don't have like the conservative qualities or moralities of like a Christian person, but then I am, yeah, it's hard for me to wonder, like it's hard for me to know if the guilt that I feel on my, personal relationships comes from like a more human perspective or a Christian perspective, But yeah, like collaborations. Yeah, collaborations. I don't know how I linked that. I don't know why I connected that, I'm just like, I am very bad at, I have a very maybe crazy way to put things in a thread of thought. Like
no, I get it.
Yeah.
That's not a far jump to talk about feeling guilt and from a discussion of religion.
Yeah, that's right. No, but like collaboration. I was just talking about collaboration. Yeah.
What do you mean? Where do you feel guilt in that?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't.
I was trying to. No, I don't. No, I was trying to like connect that with like, yeah. I don't forget about it. Take that part out. It doesn't make sense.
Well, let me see. Let me just see if I can put a button on it if this makes sense. Because I do think that like the meaningfulness of collaborating with other people and in creating, like, what I enjoy about collaboration is that other people will bring in things that I would never have thought of that make the piece of art, whatever I'm doing, whether it's a script or a song or something, better than I could have ever done it on my own. Or have a facet to it that I could never. That to me feels like that interaction is so full of meaning in a way that, sitting at temple and reading a prayer or something is devoid of it.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I feel that having this, education maybe in journalism or, like, I am very fond of trying to find meaning on stuff that is very banal or like everyday kind of stuff. So if I went to church now, I would try to listen to the guy and try to criticize him all the way, or maybe like say, oh, he's saying he's having a point, but maybe from another perspective. So yeah, so I wouldn't like burn the bridge or, like stop my brain from listening if I went to church and trying to make it something meaningful. But
it's intellectual and not spiritual.
Exactly.
I think that's the difference.
Exactly, that's the difference. But when you are in a process of creating with someone else, it teaches you so much about yourself, about your ego, about your, like whatever, It, for me, it has really brought to my attention aspects of my personality that I like. This is something that you have to work on,
Yeah. Oh, the ego part.
So that's where the guilt thing is that I was telling you about, But yeah.
Because think about it like this, right? You have you have to subvert your ego to both the art and to whoever you're collaborating with. In some cases, you're also like you shouldn't because you're right and they're wrong, or there's just certain things like I was writing I was working on a script yesterday, and there was something in it where I'm just like, I love how I've written this, but it just doesn't serve. It's making the script worse, and I deleted it. But there was this struggle between me and the thing where it's like, well, my ego says you wrote it well, so keep it in there. But I know that it makes it actually worse at the end of the day. So I need to take it out. And then when you add in another person, it's then like, well, is the thing I've written better than what they've written? And you have to worry about the ego there too.
Yeah. No, exactly. And there's like when it doesn't become only about your ego, and it becomes even like you feeling bad for other people's ego, right?
Yes.
And
yes. You're like, should I let this in because I won the last two arguments about what should be part of this, and now I'm going to let them win, and so it's guilt over whether it's good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like layers and layers of guilt, and then the aesthetic perspective or the art becomes even more complicated because it has this politics inside of it. I was talking with Chris Corsano the other day. He's a drummer. I don't know if you know. Yeah, okay. You know him?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And we were talking about this because he was mixing something, and he was like, I want to mix this, but this person is doing something very interesting, but this other guy, he's also doing stuff, but I don't want to put him down on the mix because he's going to he's going to feel that, he's being dismissed, and I don't want to hurt his ego, or who am I to tell that this is sounding better than the other guy, right? So it becomes a thing about like feeling that your aesthetic perspective, or like you in dialogue with other aesthetic perspectives, you reach a point of consensus or whatever, or you reach a point where you say like, my aesthetic perspective is the one that's going to be the final.
It's making art is a dialectic between empathy and ego. And
exactly.
Sometimes consensus actually makes it worse. Like sometimes consensus makes it a mediocre there's we can just go through a million films made in Hollywood that are made by committee and are therefore mediocre because it is taking everyone's point of view into account.
Yo, that's crazy, right? Like, and how do you have like this perspective of mediocrity? For example, like how do we reach a point where you say, oh, this is mediocre or not?
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to the very beginning because it is interesting. There are institutional, especially here in Los Angeles, there are institutional pathways that push everything into mediocrity. Whereas, when you had this blank slate, obviously it doesn't come from it comes from a kind of like tragic or traumatic reason, but it does give you a kind of pathway to be yourself as opposed to, you could have definitely, if you wanted to, or if that's how it worked out, fallen into institutional mediocrity.
Yeah. Exactly. But how do you know? How do you know that? I mean, like how do you know, and how to blame the institution, and when do you know? For example, when it's something that is small, for example, or like independent or whatever, like you don't even like get into these institutions. You are just like kind of like a witness to whatever is around you, and maybe react to the institution because that's your point of reference, or maybe not. Maybe you are a rebel and you just like keep doing your stuff. Again, it depends on
how strong your ego is and how much power you can gain.
So the thing is, the conclusion is like maybe fortify that ego. Like being, like
or fortify, but also have the empathy to know
when something is okay,
to be able to see it from
wrong.
Outside your own point of view, to know when you were wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like there's so much talk about ego that is like bad talk about ego, and everyone knows that it's not true. Like everyone wants to make a good ego out of themselves, right? So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Mabe,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me. This was
Yeah, no, thank
absolute delight to talk to you.
you. It was an absolute delight to talk to you. I love your shirt, The Purple Mountains.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love David Berman is one of my favorite,
Yeah, me too.
artists. Oh my God. He knew how to write lyrics. He knew how to write lyrics, man. He was best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, how long was the conversation?
A little over an hour.
Didn't even notice. No, thank you. It was great.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh.